All right. I'm going to take us outside the season per se to the recruiting front and the big pickup, the flip from Clemson, of course, the quarterback by way of Connecticut high school football, and that's Blake Hebert. Just your impressions of his abilities based on what you've seen.
Well, yeah, it's interesting. I found a video that we did back in, I think it was like June of 2023 when he was kind of on that top prospects board for Notre Dame very early on, and just watch him even back as a sophomore. He's a big armed kid. He's kind of got that prototype quarterback size, 6'2.5", 6'3", 215. Quick release, can throw off arm. He can change the arm angles a little bit, a lot like modern quarterbacks, but he's a big armed over the top kid. Good athlete, not a guy that's going to, run for 700 yards, be like a Riley Leonard type of guy, but can run the read zone, can move the chains with his legs, can make some big plays if you give him a crease, and just a smart kid, leader. Everyone that I've talked to about him says he's got great leadership skills and all those type of things. So I think it's a really good pickup, and you don't see Notre Dame flip kids from Clemson very often. So I think that was a big part of this. Part of this too was being able to go against a team that you're competing with for playoff spots on a yearly basis, and you're able to flip a quarterback that's been committed to them for over. I mean, he's been committed to Clemson longer than Deuce Knight was committed to Notre Dame. And he was a guy that they liked a lot very early on, but he was at the time all set on Clemson, and Notre Dame was able to change that a little bit.
So it's a 5-1 season right now. And aside from the one outlier, that's the obvious as a 29-point favorite, I don't think that there's any super, super positive spin given to this season or super negative spin. Notre Dame's about where you would expect them to be at this point. Certainly they could be undefeated, but there were some possible losses on the schedule to this point. And again, just about position where you would expect, around number 10 in the nation. So do you think what has transpired this season has had any impact one way or the other on the overall recruiting situation?
No, not yet. I look, kids aren't going to look at things the way we do as fans, right? I've said this to Notre Dame fans for years. Every time they lose a game, who's going to decommit? And I'm like, nobody probably. I mean, because recruits don't look at this like we do. And
Hopefully
I don't mean that
not.
as an insult. I mean that like I've been a Notre Dame fan 40 years, I mean, you've been a fan of your favorite team for how long? I don't know if that's out there, so I didn't want to say it, and we look at things sort of, just in a way that is just more emotional because it's our team. And most of these prospects don't make these decisions, don't look at these things the same way. Plus, when things don't go well, a lot of times recruits are going to look at it and say, well, wait till I get there. Or this wouldn't have happened if I was there. Or we're not going to let that happen when we get there. And that's why you don't often see kids decommit because of a bad game. Now, if Notre Dame's 2-4 right now or 3-3 right now, then we may be having a different conversation. But, just the one loss is not going to negate what we've seen with the Louisville win, with the Texas A&M win, and the fact that, as you mentioned, this is a top 10 football team. And if Notre Dame was 6-0 right now and had won every game by 40, Deuce Knight still decommits. I mean, that had nothing to do with it because he flipped to a team that's 2-4. You know what I mean? So it wasn't about wins and losses. It was about, other things, because it's not about
Other
education.
things.
It's not about winning and losing. It's about other things, because otherwise he'd have picked someone other than Auburn. So that's kind of where that's at. So no, it hasn't had a dramatic effect now. Now, how the season ends, if they, struggle down the stretch, that could have a bit of a bigger impact. But as of now, recruiting is still rolling along. And they like I said, they flipped 2 kids on Monday because they also flipped an offensive lineman from Iowa.
Oh,
so,
okay.
Yeah.
Who is that?
Cameron Herron. It's a kid from Indianapolis that Notre Dame had him camped this summer. Decided not to take him at the time because they only wanted to take 3 offensive linemen, and they already had 3 kids in the class they liked a lot. And he's having a really good senior season, and they decided they wanted a center prospect in the class, so they went out and got him. And I know he's ranked in the top 300 by On3, and he's ranked in the top 300 by 247 Sports, although I don't put a lot of stock in, to be honest with you, 247 Sports rankings. But, he's a quality prospect, center kid, and he fits a need, of kind of what they're looking for.
Yeah. So while we're on the topic, we'll just stay right there. Is there anybody on this commitment list to date, other than the obvious at the top of the board? Anybody that really stands out to you that you think, hey, I don't think they're rated correctly. I really like that they went out and got this guy that's under the radar.
Well, if you're going to use 247's rankings, there's a lot of guys that they have ranked incredibly wrong. No, but I mean, when I look at it, I see some kids that right now I'm comfortable with their ranking, but I think they're higher upside kids. You know, like a guy like Ethan Long, for example. I'm comfortable where his ranking is right now because I think he's still a tall, skinny kid that's still learning the game. But he's one of those kids that has a very high upside, a kid that I think has a chance to down the road be a really good player. A guy like Gordy Solstead that you look at right there. I'm totally comfortable with his 3-star ranking, but he's one of those guys. He's 6'6", he's 250 pounds. He's bigger than that listed right there. His dad played, I think Miami of Ohio was a 300-plus pound offensive lineman that played in the NFL a little bit. So he's got some good DNA. So he's another kid. They did 247. One of the few things they got right was bumping Elijah Burris up to a 4-star. He's been a 4-star on the Irish Breakdown board since he committed to Notre Dame. He's having a heck of a senior season. So, it's one of those classes that you look at, Mark, and some of the kids they got a very strange ranking. And I like Dallas Golden. Look, I've evaluated a lot of defensive backs to come to Notre Dame over the years, and that kid's a top 50 football player if I've ever seen one. He's up on the list quite a bit. And he's a guy that to me, that's a top 50 football player. And I don't really care how anybody ranks him. And that's down. He was ranked 70th on 247 in their last update. And they, for some reason that I'm sure they have a reason for it, that's a bad one, has dropped like 90 spots in the last ranking, despite being one of the best players in the state of Florida. That kid gives me Benjamin Morrison vibes with bigger body and more athleticism coming out of high school. And that was another kid that was ranked. Nobody had him in their top 300 coming out of high school, and he's turned out to be pretty good. So I love this secondary class. It's an elite secondary class. And, Jadon Blair is a kid right there. That's another guy that I graded out as a top 50 football player. James Flanagan's dad played in Notre Dame. He was on that 1993 defensive line with Bryant Young. That is kind of interesting. You look at that 93 team and, those two stud interior guys that Notre Dame had on that great defensive line. Their kids are both going to be at Notre Dame next season. Obviously, Bryant Young's son is already at Notre Dame, and Jim Flanagan's son will be there soon. And Jerome Bettis' son will be on the team next year. Plexico Burris' son will be on the team next year. So it's a lot of former NFL players like to send their kids to Notre Dame, for a lot of different reasons. But and I really like that offensive line class that they have coming in next year as well. And Cam Herron's a solid addition to that group. But I really like this class. They just got to finish, right? That's the thing, is they got to finish. They need one more receiver. They're on a kid from Texas named Jalen Cooper, who I like a lot. Currently committed to SMU. I think On3 has him as a borderline top 100 player. They're also trying to finish with Madden Faramo, who's a kid from California, from Gardena, California. Very talented linebacker. Reminds me a lot of Kingston Viliama Asa. So the finish is going to be the key, right? Keep the kids you have in the class and then finish strong at wide receiver and linebacker. And they're going to have a top 100 player from Florida visiting for the Florida State game who's currently committed to Florida, a kid from Tallahassee. So that's a fun one. He's from Tallahassee, committed to Florida, is going to visit Notre Dame for their game against Florida State on November 9th. So that's another kid they're trying to finish with, along with obviously Nathaniel Usu-Boateng, whose brother Jeremiah played at Notre Dame.
Well, I guess considering where Florida State recruiting stands right now, at least he didn't commit to Florida State and then decommit.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of that happening with the Seminoles right now. There's no doubt about it. Like, that's the kind of season that can cause your class to fall apart, Mark, right? Like getting upset one Saturday in early September against Northern Illinois, which was a bad loss. There's no spinning that loss. It's just that prospects don't emotionally react to those things the way we do as fans, which is why you don't see those big jumps. Now, had they followed it up with a loss to Purdue and maybe a loss to Louisville and some things like that, then sure, we might see a couple kids jump out of there because they don't see Notre Dame as being a championship program. But, I said more often than not, it takes a really bad falling apart type season for kids to leave because of what's happening on the field.